طوبى للباب هو حق الرقيا تبني صرحا.
There's a question that makes a lot of Christians uncomfortable, and it's worth asking plainly. How much of Paul's theology came from Jesus and the Jewish scriptures, and how much of it came from the Greek and Roman world he was preaching to? Because when you actually read Paul's own words in the New Testament, you find him reaching for pagan poetry, pagan proverbs, and pagan categories again and again. Let me show you, straight from the text. Start in Athens, Acts chapter 17. Paul is preaching to a crowd of Greek philosophers, and to make his case he quotes their own poets. He says, "In him we live and move and have our being," and then, "For we are also his offspring." That second line is not from the Hebrew scriptures. It's a direct quotation from the Greek poet Aratus, a Stoic, writing about the god Zeus. Paul takes a line originally written in praise of Zeus and applies it to his own god. This isn't a Muslim reading it in. This is simply what the passage says, Paul, quoting pagan religious poetry to build his argument. Now, a Christian will respond that Paul was just finding common ground, using their culture as a bridge, and that's a fair point to raise. But notice what Paul does and doesn't do. He does not say the poets were wrong about being God's offspring. He accepts the framing and redirects it. He keeps the pagan category and refits it around his own message. The question that leaves open is a serious one. When you build your theology by refitting pagan categories, how much of the result is revelation, and how much is the borrowed frame? Then there's a detail most people read straight past. In Acts chapter 26, Paul is retelling his conversion to King Agrippa, and this time, only this time, he adds a line to what the voice said to him on the road. The voice says, "It is hard for you to kick against the goads." Here's what's striking about that. This exact phrase was a well-known saying in Greek literature. Its most famous appearance is in a play by Euripides called the Bacchae, where the god Dionysus, persecuted and unrecognized, warns the man hunting him not to kick against the goads, not to fight a god. A mortal, resisting a god who's pursuing him. That is almost exactly the scene Paul describes, a divine voice telling its persecutor to stop resisting. And this line appears in none of the earlier tellings of the story, not in Acts 9, not in Acts 22. It shows up only here, in the version told to a Greek-educated king. So either the risen Jesus quoted a Greek proverb best known from a pagan tragedy, or the author shaped the story using language his Greek audience would recognize. Both possibilities land in the same uncomfortable place. Pagan literature is woven into the telling. The pattern goes deeper than quotations. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 6. Paul takes the Shema, Judaism's central declaration that God is one, and he splits it. He puts God the Father on one side and one Lord, Jesus Christ, on the other, folding Jesus into the very confession of God's oneness. Even Christian scholars recognize this as a remarkable and unprecedented move. The most sacred statement of Jewish monotheism, restructured to make room for a second figure. Whatever you call that, it is not the plain monotheism of the prophets who came before. Step back and look at the shape of it. Paul quotes pagan poets to Greeks. Paul's conversion story picks up a line from Greek tragedy. Paul reworks the Jewish creed to include a second Lord. Piece by piece, you are watching a theology take shape at the meeting point of Jerusalem and Athens, and a great deal of it is bending toward Athens. None of this requires you to hate Paul or to doubt he was sincere. It only requires you to read him honestly. And when you do, the man who gave Christianity most of its theology looks less like a messenger passing on what he received untouched, and more like a brilliant synthesizer, blending the God of Israel with the language, the poetry, and the categories of the pagan world he lived in. The Tawhid of Islam needs none of that blending. It stands as what the prophets always said: God is one, not one restructured to make room for another, simply one.